Imagine waking up in a world where the roads are silent. No cars pass by, no buses rumble down the street, no bikes glide past you. The ground beneath your feet is not scarred by endless circles of tires, because there never were any. The wheel, the most ordinary object in our world, so simple we barely notice it, was never invented. Imagine history unfolding without it. Empires rising and falling without chariots. Cities built without wagons, science advancing without gears. What would our world look like if humanity had never created the wheel? Think about it. One of the most basic shapes in nature, the circle, never became the foundation of civilization. No carriages drawn by horses, no carts filled with grain, no pottery wheels shaping clay, no gears to drive engines or clocks. A single invention that carried the weight of progress simply never existed. Instead, our ancestors were forced to find other ways to move, to build, to fight, to dream. This is not just a change in technology. This is a change in destiny. Every road you've walked, every city you've lived in, every machine that's carried you forward, every clock that's ticked away the hours of your life, all of it is tied to the wheel. Take it away, and we step into a parallel Earth, one that feels both familiar and alien. A world that demands we imagine not only what humanity lost, but also what it created instead. And here's the question that should haunt you. If our species had never turned that circle, would we still be here, thriving, connected, reaching for the stars? Or would we still be locked in place, bound by the limits of our own bodies and beasts of burden? Now, I want you to pause for a moment. Close your eyes, if you can. Picture your own life without wheels. No bike to learn balance as a child. No bus carrying you to school. No car rushing you to a first date. No airplane soaring into the sky, because even its landing gear depends on wheels. The life you know would be unrecognizable. And yet, humanity is stubborn, resilient, creative. If the wheel was never invented, we would not simply stop. We would find another path, another way to carve progress from the world around us. That is the story we are about to tell. Welcome to What If History. If you are fascinated by these journeys into the worlds that might have been, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next leap into imagination. Today, we travel into a universe where the wheel never turned and discover how history itself had to take a different road. So let us begin. To understand a world without wheels, we must first ask, how did the wheel itself come to be in our own timeline? And how could it have been lost before it ever began? To grasp the origins of a world without wheels, we must strip away everything we know about our own past. Imagine standing in the Fertile Crescent 10,000 years ago. The first farmers bend their backs in the fields, pulling grain from the earth with flint sickles. Their villages are rising, mud brick walls, thatched roofs, clay jars. In our history, it was here that the wheel was born, not first for transport, but for shaping clay, for turning raw mud into vessels of storage and trade. From that humble beginning came the cart, the chariot, the carriage, and eventually the automobile. But in this alternate world, that moment never arrives. The potter's wheel is not discovered. Clay is still shaped by hand, smoothed slowly, imperfectly. The idea of rotation as a tool simply does not take hold. Generations pass without the spark. The straight line, not the circle, becomes the guiding principle of human invention. Without the wheel, early societies look to what they have always known, the river, the beast, and the sled. Across the Nile, the Indus, the Yellow River, and the Tigris, humanity builds civilizations that lean not on roads but on water. Boats are crafted earlier, made larger, more stable, more essential than in our own world. Where we once dug ruts for wheels, they dig canals. Where we once built roads, they carve waterways. The river is not a boundary, it is the highway of their lives. Beasts of burden are harnessed differently. Without carts, horses, and oxen are not yoked to wagons, but to sledges. Heavy loads are dragged on frames greased with animal fat, or on logs laid out like rails. Imagine an ancient construction site. Instead of great wheeled carts hauling stone, you see teams of laborers sliding massive blocks across long beds of timber soaked with water to reduce friction. The method is slow, backbreaking, but it is enough. Pyramids still rise, ziggurats still climb toward the heavens, but at a greater human cost. Sweat, muscle, and ingenuity replace the turning of wheels. Trade, too, takes a different shape. Caravans form, but not as lines of wagons rolling across the land. Instead, you see trains of camels and donkeys carrying sacks across their backs. Every step is slower, every journey longer. Distance itself is a greater enemy. Entire cities grow only where water can reach them. Inland empires are fragile, constrained. The seas and rivers are lifelines more vital than any road could ever be. In this world, the first great divide between our history and theirs is not between East and West, but between those who live close to the water and those who do not. River peoples thrive, building vast networks of barges and ferries. Inland tribes, without carts to carry grain or tools, remain isolated for centuries longer. Civilizations fracture along lines of geography that in our world were bridged by the wheel. But humanity adapts. For them, progress is not found in circles, but in sleds that glide, canals that carry, ropes that pull. The earliest engineers perfect the art of dragging heavy loads. They polish stone runners until they gleam. They learn to freeze water in winter and slide their goods across icy tracks. They invent harnesses that allow animals to drag sleighs across plains. Imagine a Mesopotamian winter market, where caravans arrive not in wagons, but in long trains of sledges skimming over frozen paths. This is the origin of their world. Not a wheel rolling across the earth, but a sledge cutting across it. Not a circle, but a line. Progress measured not by rotation, but by friction overcome. And yet, as these civilizations grow, something else begins to shift. Without wheels, the very rhythm of human life changes. Journeys take longer, empires expand slower, and wars are fought differently. Imagine an ancient battlefield without chariots. No wheels thunder across the plain, no bronze-clad warriors racing into the fray. Battles are fought on foot, with cavalry alone carrying speed and terror. The wheel, in our world, gave armies power. Without it, power belongs only to the river and the horse. So, the story of this world begins here, with rivers that bind societies together, with sledges pulled by weary beasts, with men and women bending against the weight of their own progress. A humanity defined not by the turning of circles, but by the dragging of lines. But as civilizations grow larger, as towns swell into cities, new questions arise. How do people live without roads filled with wheels? What does daily life look like when the river is the marketplace, the highway, and the heart of every settlement? Let us step closer into the lives of those who built their world by the rivers and see how a society without wheels shapes not only its trade, but its very culture. Step into one of their cities. It does not sprawl outward with roads and wheels like the cities we know. Instead, it stretches like a hand along the veins of water. Canals are its streets, barges are its wagons. Every home, every market, every temple is turned toward the river as if it were a god. The sound you hear is not the rattle of carts or the creak of wooden wheels, but the steady lap of water against stone, the splash of oars, the calls of boatmen steering their cargo through narrow channels. Imagine walking through such a place at dawn. The fog clings low over the canals, the air heavy with the smell of damp wood and cooking fires. Boats tied along the edges are already being loaded. Sacks of grain, baskets of fruit, bundles of cloth. Merchants balance across planks from shore to deck, their voices rising as they bargain, the water carrying the echoes through the streets. Instead of roads filled with dust and hoofprints, you see water glistening under the morning light. The river is not an obstacle. It is the marketplace, the highway, the lifeblood. Children do not chase wheels in play. They skip stones across the canal, or tie reeds together into small rafts that drift with the current. Lovers walk hand in hand along the embankments, whispering their promises over the flow of the water. Priests conduct ceremonies at the docks, casting offerings into the river, believing its currents carry prayers to the divine. The very culture of the city bends itself to the water, shaping rituals, myths, and daily rhythms. Trade follows this lifeline. Caravans still exist, but they are smaller, slower, bound to beasts and sledges. The real wealth flows on boats. Entire economies depend on whether rivers rise or fall. When floods come, commerce surges. When drought dries the channels, markets collapse. Power belongs not to the landlocked kings who dream of conquests, but to the river lords who control the canals, who build dams and locks to command the flow. Wars are not fought over crossroads, but over water routes, each canal a contested artery of wealth. The layout of their towns reflects this devotion. Houses are built with steps descending into the water. Markets float on barges tied side by side, forming shifting platforms that sway underfoot. Workshops rise along the canals, so goods can be loaded directly onto waiting boats. Where we might build highways leading into the horizon, they dig channels deeper into the land, extending their cities by water rather than by road. And as the cities grow, so too does the art of engineering the river itself. Locks, sluices, aqueducts, all perfected centuries earlier than in our own timeline. These people do not think in circles, they think in flows. To them, the true mark of civilization is not how wide your roads are, but how smooth your canals run, how far your waterways reach. To control water is to control life itself. Picture the heart of one of these river cities at night. Lanterns float across the canal, their reflections shimmering like stars in liquid skies. Music drifts from boats tied together for feasts, entire neighborhoods celebrating on the water. The city does not sleep under the silence of wheels. It dreams in ripples, wakes with the tide, and lives with the current. But the river is not only a gift, it is also a chain. Towns that rise far from waterways are stunted, trapped in isolation. Villages in deserts or high mountains remain small, unable to trade beyond what their animals can carry. Without wheels, distance remains an enemy, and the world fractures into pockets of prosperity and poverty. The river is both salvation and prison. This is the life shaped by water, a civilization built not upon roads and wheels, but upon currents and canals, a people whose every step is turned toward the riverbank, whose every story begins with the sound of oars. And yet, beyond the hum of trade and the glow of lanterns, another question rises. How do these civilizations fight? Without wheels, without carts, without chariots, what does the clash of armies look like? How does war unfold on a battlefield where no wheels ever turn? Let us walk now from the canals into the smoke of battle, where men fight not with wagons and chariots, but with new strategies forged in the absence of the wheel. War in this world thunders differently. There is no sound of chariot wheels rattling across plains, no iron-rimmed circles pounding against the earth. The battlefield is stripped of that image we know so well. The warrior raised high in a wooden cart, hurling spears as horses drag him forward. Here, the fight belongs to the ground beneath your boots and the strength of your mount. Imagine the clash of ancient armies without wheels. Infantry stand shoulder to shoulder, shields glinting under the sun. Spears brace like a forest of steel. Horses scream across the line, their riders wielding bows, lances, curved blades. Cavalry is not a support to wheeled chariots. It is the spearhead itself. The horse becomes king of the battlefield. Empires rise not through roads of stone for their wagons, but through vast breeding grounds for their steeds. The culture of the warrior is inseparable from the animal he rides. The absence of wheels changes everything. Siege warfare, for example, is slower, more brutal. There are no great wheeled towers trundling towards city walls, no heavy trebuchets on rolling platforms. Instead, soldiers drag massive rams on sledges, inch by inch, toward their targets. Attackers build earthen ramps and wooden sled frames to inch their siege machines closer. Defenders rain fire and arrows upon them as they drag each crushing beam forward. Every conquest is paid for in sweat, time, and blood. Picture the campaigns of mighty empires. The Persians, the Greeks, the Romans in our world depended on roads and carts to supply their armies. But here, the story is different. Armies march lighter, carrying what they can on their backs, supported by caravans of animals straining under the load. Supplies move slowly, and battles are often dictated by the limits of distance and hunger. Armies hug the rivers, never straying too far from their floating lifelines. A kingdom without access to navigable water is weak, for its soldiers cannot be fed in the field. The Mongols of our history swept across continents on horseback, their power multiplied by carts of supplies and siege engines rolling behind them. But in this world, their reach is broken. Their cavalry is still fierce, their bows still deadly, but their expansion slows when they cannot drag enough food or weapons across vast plains. The rivers, not the steppe, determine destiny. It is not the horsemen who dominate the world, but the lords of the canals. Yet necessity breeds invention. Military minds in this world devise new strategies. They develop sled-mounted ballistae, dragged into place by teams of men. They harness elephants and oxen to pull massive sledges loaded with stones, rolling not on wheels, but sliding across greased wooden tracks. The siege fields of this alternate Earth are scarred with trenches filled with logs, each one a desperate attempt to move machines forward without the aid of turning wheels. And battles themselves? They are longer, more exhausting. Without the speed of chariots or carts, war is fought at a slower rhythm. Soldiers march, collapse, march again. Cavalry strikes hard, but must retreat quickly without wagons of supplies to follow them. Armies stall, not because of enemy walls, but because of empty bellies. Wars are decided by rivers, by who controls the supply barges, by who can keep their men fed the longest. And yet, through this struggle, a new kind of warrior emerges. Not the charioteer, not the engineer of wheels, but the river general, leaders who master the tides, who build floating bridges and moving fortresses on barges. Imagine a battle where entire armies clash not on land, but on linked rafts drifting across a wide river, soldiers fighting as water churns below. War, in this world, is fluid, literally. But warfare is never only about soldiers and battles. It is about what sustains them, the food, the grain, the lifeblood of civilizations. And so, the question arises, without wheels, how do farmers feed the armies, the towns, the growing cities? How does agriculture adapt to a world where no cart carries harvests, no millstone spins in endless circles? Let us leave the battlefield behind and walk into the fields, where the absence of the wheel changes not only how wars are fought, but how people eat and survive. The battlefield fades, and in its place stretch endless fields of grain. Agriculture, quiet, steady, relentless, is the foundation of every civilization. And in a world without wheels, farming becomes both more burdensome and more inventive. Imagine harvest season in Mesopotamia. Farmers bend low, cutting barley and wheat by hand, the air thick with the scent of earth and sweat. But now there are no carts waiting at the edge of the field, no wooden wheels creaking as they carry the bounty home. Instead, oxen drag sledges piled high with stalks, the wood groaning as it slides over the dirt. Every trip is harder, every load smaller. The farmer's back is bent not only under the sun, but under the weight of a civilization that must drag itself forward inch by inch. Grinding grain is another struggle. In our history, the turning of a wheel became the heart of mills, powered by water, wind, or hand. But here, rotation is not the path. Millstones do not spin in endless circles. Instead, they grind by rocking back and forth, pushed in heavy strokes, or dragged linearly like saws slicing wood. Picture lines of workers pushing long beams across stones, crushing grain not by rotation, but by relentless forward and back motion. The process is slower, the yield smaller. Bread remains a treasure of sweat. Water, too, is mastered differently. Without pulleys or water wheels, irrigation systems are crude at first, then ingenious. Farmers dig vast channels and dams, guiding the flow by gravity alone. They invent giant siphons and seesaw pumps, beams weighted with stone, dipping buckets into rivers and tipping them into canals. Entire communities gather at dawn to haul water in synchronized rhythm, bodies swaying like human machines. Where in our world water wheels turned with grace, here men and women themselves become the wheels that never were. Transporting surplus is the greatest challenge. Grain cannot be loaded onto wagons and rolled across miles of land. Instead, rivers once again dictate destiny. Farmers haul sacks on their shoulders to barges that drift downstream to the cities. Where rivers do not flow, herds of camels, donkeys, and oxen stagger under loads strapped to their backs. Every kernel of grain is carried by muscle, animal or human. The limits of transport define the limits of civilization itself. Large cities can exist only where the river feeds them. Regions far from water remain forever small, their people bound by hunger and distance. Yet, even here, necessity sparks invention. In the cold of winter, frozen fields become highways of ice. Farmers learn to pack their harvests onto sledges and slide them across the snow. In dry plains, they polish long stone tracks, creating smooth paths where sledges glide more easily, reducing friction. Across the centuries, these primitive railways of stone and wood crisscross the fields like veins of survival. Picture a harvest festival in this world. Instead of carts rolling through the village, you see long trains of sledges drawn by oxen, decorated with flowers and ribbons, their wooden frames dragging across the earth as children run alongside. The grain is heaped high, carried into barns where it will be threshed by hand and ground by rocking stones. The music of the festival rises, but beneath it all lies the heavy truth. Every loaf of bread is harder won. This hardship reshapes society. Farmers are honored not only as laborers, but as lifelines. Communities grow closer, bound by the shared weight of survival. Feasts are not celebrations of abundance, but triumphs over scarcity. Agriculture becomes not just an economic activity, but a spiritual one, where each harvest feels like a miracle dragged out of the soil. And as the villages grow into towns, another question emerges. How do these people, without wheels, build their cities? What do streets and buildings look like when no wagon ever carves a rut in the earth? Let us walk now into the heart of these settlements, where architecture rises and streets are shaped, not by wheels, but by the flow of people and water. Step now into their cities, and you will see a world unfamiliar, yet strangely beautiful. Streets are not carved for wagons. They are narrow, winding, alive with footsteps. The sound of hooves and creaking wheels is missing. Instead, you hear sandals slapping stone, voices echoing down alleys, the steady splash of oars from canals that cut through the heart of every town. Urban life bends itself around the absence of wheels. Roads are not broad arteries for traffic, but intimate corridors for people and animals. At the edges, polished stone tracks gleam, rails for sledges dragged by oxen or pulled by teams of men. These tracks are carved smooth and straight, some inlaid with wood soaked in oil to reduce friction. Imagine a great boulevard, not filled with carriages, but lined with parallel grooves where sledges glide back and forth, scraping their slow rhythm through the heart of the city. Architecture itself adapts. Without wagons to bring heavy loads from afar, builders quarry stone near the cities, dragging blocks along greased ramps and scaffolds. Towers rise squat and solid, built to endure the immense strain of being raised without rolling carts or cranes with pulleys. Walls lean inward, thick and massive, because lighter building methods tied to wheeled transport never evolve. Cities take on the look of fortresses, their silhouettes heavy and immovable against the sky. Canals are the grand boulevards. Palaces, temples, and markets line their edges, facing the water like proud sentinels. Bridges arch high, not for wagons to pass beneath, but for barges stacked with goods. The heart of civic life beats at the water's edge. Markets float on rafts, guild halls open onto docks, festivals spill onto boats tied together in chains of light. The city is less a spider's web of roads than a river delta, spreading, branching, pulsing with current. Public squares, too, are different. Where in our world they fill with the rattle of carts and the shuffle of traders, here they echo with chants, music, and the dragging of sledges carrying goods across polished stone floors. Statues stand not in the center of crossroads, but on piers stretching into the water, their reflections shimmering as if doubled in another world below. Transportation shapes social life. In our history, cities sprawled outward as wheels made long distances manageable. Here, they remain compact, dense, pressed against their rivers and canals. Streets are not wide and open but narrow, layered and vertical. Homes stack on top of one another, climbing toward the sky because expansion outward is limited. The skyline grows jagged, crowded, a forest of towers clustered together around the lifeblood of water. And yet, there is beauty in this design. At night, lanterns hang from windows close enough to touch across narrow alleys. The canals glow with reflections of firelight. Music drifts across the water, carried into every corner of the city. The absence of wheels gives rise to intimacy. People live close, speak close, dream close. The city breathes as a single organism, every heartbeat tied to the rhythm of the current. But this architecture carries costs. Fires spread faster through narrow lanes. Disease lingers in stagnant canals. Crowds choke passageways because goods cannot be hauled away quickly. Progress comes slower, harder, and each expansion requires ingenuity. Builders perfect the art of ramps, slides, and sledges. Massive projects take decades longer, yet through it all, the city still rises, stubborn against limitation. Humanity refuses to remain small. Still, every stone raised, every market opened, every tower built depends on one force beyond architecture, the hum of industry. For civilization to move forward, machines must take over where muscles fail. But in this world, machines cannot turn wheels or gears. So how does industry awaken without the circle? How do factories roar? How does energy flow when rotation itself is denied? Let us walk into the forges, the workshops, the smoke of invention, and see how a civilization without wheels learns to power its future. The city fades behind us, and in its place rises the sound of hammers striking iron, furnaces roaring, and sparks flying into the night. Industry is the pulse of progress. Yet here, there are no wheels spinning, no gears meshing in endless dance. The world of machines has been forced to take another path. Imagine a blacksmith's workshop. In our history, the water wheel powered his forge. Gears transferred motion. Bellows pumped air in rhythm. But here, there is no wheel to turn, no gear to catch. The blacksmith's apprentices pull long handles back and forth, driving the bellows in a linear motion, their arms aching as flames roar higher. Power is not circular. It is back and forth, push and pull. Linear motion becomes the heartbeat of invention. Factories are built upon this principle. Where our history filled with shafts and pulleys, their world fills with beams, levers, and cables stretched taut across wooden frames. Machines slam, press, and drag. Picture a great loom, not wheels turning spindles, but weighted sledges sliding up and down, ropes snapping forward and back, weaving cloth in jerking rhythm. The sound is not the hum of rotation, but the pounding of pistons. Energy is harnessed differently too. Waterfalls are not captured by water wheels, but by ram pumps and plunging beams. Rivers power giant levers that seesaw endlessly, transferring force through cables and counterweights. Windmills do not turn sails into spinning motion, but instead drive panels back and forth like the beating of wings, pulling rods that pump or crush in rhythm. Everywhere, the world breathes in straight lines, never in circles. The great revolution of steam arrives differently. In our history, the steam engine turned pistons into wheels, wheels into gears, gears into motion. But here, engineers double down on the piston itself. Steam drives colossal arms that slam forward and retract, pulling chains that drag sledges, lifting platforms in jerks and heaves. Trains as we know them never exist. Instead, sled lines stretch across nations. Iron tracks greased and polished, over which massive steam-drawn sledges glide, screaming with sparks. They lurch, they grind, but they carry goods and people farther than muscle ever could. Imagine crossing a continent not on a train of wheels, but on a thunderous iron sledge sliding across rails of steel, the earth shaking with every thrust of the pistons. Industry grows monstrous, heavy, unforgiving. Without the precision of gears, machines are larger, more brutal. Factories rumble with pounding strokes, their beams crashing like the heartbeat of titans. Workers live in their shadow, battered by noise and danger. Every invention requires more muscle, more material, more raw force. Progress comes, but at a cost. And yet, the absence of wheels breeds brilliance. Engineers learn to tame friction with oil, ice, and air. They discover early forms of hovercraft, sledges lifted by cushions of air, gliding smooth where once they scraped. By the 18th century, dockyards are filled with strange contraptions, barges floating on rivers of steam, platforms lifted by air pressure, machines that move like beasts pounding their legs forward. Where our world turns smoothly, theirs lurches, slides, and hammers, but it moves nonetheless. Picture a factory town in this world. Streets are lined not with carts and wagons, but with tracks of polished stone where industrial sledges drag raw ore. Great chimneys belch smoke into the sky, while inside, iron pistons drive the machinery of progress. The air trembles with the thunder of industry, a rhythm not of circles, but of pounding strokes. This is the soul of their industrial revolution, brutal, linear, defiant. A revolution without wheels, where progress is not smooth but jagged, not graceful but relentless. But industry alone cannot sustain a civilization. It must be matched by the advance of knowledge, the careful work of science, the delicate art of medicine. And here, perhaps more than anywhere, the absence of the wheel leaves the deepest scars. Let us step now into the laboratories and the infirmaries, and see how a world without wheels grapples with discovery, healing, and the limits of human life. Step into their laboratories and healing halls, and the silence is striking. Not the hum of gears, not the spinning of glass centrifuges, not the whir of cogs measuring time. Here, discovery must walk a harder road. Without wheels and gears, science itself stumbles forward differently, slower in some ways, startlingly inventive in others. Begin with astronomy. In our world, great observatories were crowned with turning domes and telescopes pivoting on axles. But in this world, telescopes are mounted on sliding tracks, dragged forward and back across rails of stone. Astronomers lie on their backs, pulling ropes to shift heavy tubes in jerks and starts, chasing stars across the sky. Precision is elusive. The heavens are mapped with more patience, more error, more wonder. They learn the same constellations, but their instruments are bulkier, stranger, monuments to stubborn curiosity. Chemistry, too, is altered. Without gears or rotary pumps, distillation and extraction rely on rocking motions, pendulums swaying back and forth, pistons pressing in steady rhythm. Imagine a laboratory where glass vessels are mounted on frames that tilt gently side to side, mixing solutions with motion that mimics waves rather than spin. Every breakthrough is born from trial and sweat, as scientists wrestle against the absence of rotation. But nowhere is the difference sharper than in medicine. In our world, the centrifuge separates blood, isolates plasma, opens the door to modern diagnostics. Here, that spinning miracle never arrives. Doctors rock flasks by hand, letting heavier parts settle slowly, imprecisely. Diseases are understood later, cures arrive slower, and the invisible world of cells and microbes remains more mysterious. Survival depends longer on brute remedies, herbs, surgery by hand, long days of recovery in dim rooms lit by oil lamps. Surgery itself evolves differently. Without pulleys, hospitals rely on sheer manpower. Patients are lifted on sliding stretchers by teams of nurses straining together. Operating tools are thicker, heavier, forged for pushing and pulling rather than precise rotation. The saw replaces the drill, the hammer replaces the crank. Imagine a surgeon leaning over a wounded soldier, sweating as he drives a chisel-like tool into bone with careful strikes, because no drill turns to pierce it cleanly. Each operation is longer, more perilous, every heartbeat louder in the silence. Yet ingenuity survives, even here. Healers learn to use flowing water as their ally. Streams of liquid move through glass channels, carrying medicine, separating mixtures, imitating functions that, in our world, depended on rotation. They discover the power of vibration, of oscillation, of air pulsed in rhythmic bursts. Slowly, a different kind of science is born, one that does not turn but flows, not circular but linear. The cost, however, is undeniable. Epidemics rage longer, their causes harder to uncover. Surgical survival rates are lower. Lifespans lengthen more slowly. Where our world leapt ahead with microscopes on turning screws and centrifuges spinning blood, theirs crawls forward with sliding tracks and rocking glass. For every discovery, a delay. For every cure, a price in human suffering. And yet, there is resilience here too. Perhaps the greatest lesson of science in this world is not precision, but perseverance. Against every limitation, humanity pushes forward, refusing to bow to absence. Where one path is closed, they carve another, even if it takes centuries longer. Still, knowledge does not grow in isolation. It lives in culture, in faith, in the symbols that people carry in their hearts. And what happens to those symbols in a world where the wheel, the circle of eternity, the cycle of life, never takes root? Let us leave the laboratory and step into the temple, the festival, the myth. Let us see how culture and religion themselves reshape when the wheel is no longer their guiding sign. Walk into their temples and you will notice at once what is missing. No sacred wheels carved in stone, no circles of eternity etched into altars, no mandalas turning like galaxies upon the walls. In our world, the wheel became a symbol of cosmic cycles, life, death, rebirth. Here, that image never exists. The circle is not their eternal shape. Instead, they worship the line, the river, the flow. Their myths are written in currents. The gods are not charioteers pulling suns across the sky, but ferrymen guiding stars down celestial rivers. Creation is not a wheel turning endlessly, but a stream beginning in the mountains of the divine and flowing forever into the sea of the unknown. Time itself is not cyclical. It is linear, an arrow cutting forward, relentless, irreversible. For these people, history is not destined to repeat, but to surge forward like a flood. Festivals embody this worldview. Where our ancestors danced in circles, theirs march in processions along the banks of canals. Drums beat like paddles striking water. Voices rise in chants that echo downstream. Lanterns float in lines, drifting away into darkness, each one carrying a prayer, a memory, a soul. The sacred act is not spinning, but releasing, letting the current take what must go, trusting it will reach the realm of the gods. Art and architecture mirror these beliefs. Spiral columns are rare. Instead, walls are lined with carvings of waves, currents, streams. Poetry speaks not of cycles, but of journeys. A life as a voyage, a soul as a boat, death as the final crossing into unseen waters. Even funerals are shaped by this. Coffins placed upon rafts and set adrift. Families weeping at the shore as their loved ones disappear downstream. The absence of the wheel reshapes morality as well. Without the belief in cycles, rebirth, and return, the urgency of each life becomes sharper. You pass once, their sages say, like a river flowing to the sea. Destiny is not about repetition, it is about legacy. What you leave behind on the shores of the world as you drift away becomes the measure of your worth. Religion itself is inseparable from control of water. Priesthoods rise not around fire or sun, but around rivers and canals. Sacred rites are performed at locks and sluices, where water is released or withheld. The flooding of the river is not just a natural event, but a holy one, the breath of a god blessing or punishing the people. Priests carry not wheels of prayer, but rods carved with flowing lines, symbols of control over the sacred currents. Even war is sanctified in these terms. A general does not boast of rolling over enemies, but of damming their rivers, starving their cities by choking their canals. Victories are celebrated with festivals of release, when floodgates are opened and water rushes through the city in roaring waves. To control the flow is to control the divine. And yet, culture without the wheel is not barren. It is rich, alive, filled with its own beauty. Songs echo not with rhythm of turning drums, but with the steady beat of oars. Dances sway back and forth, like boats in waves. Storytellers weave tales not of cycles repeating, but of rivers branching, splitting into countless possible futures. Imagine standing in one of their grand temples at night. The air is thick with incense, the roof open to the stars. Below, a long canal runs straight through the temple's heart, water gleaming under torchlight. Priests float offerings down this sacred channel, their voices rising in chants that speak of journeys without return. The worshippers watch in silence, knowing that they too are part of that current, drifting toward an endless sea. But culture does not exist alone. It collides with the forces of progress, with the machinery of the modern age. And as the centuries turn, humanity faces a new challenge: how to build a modern world without wheels, how to create nations, connect continents, and embrace technology when the circle never turns. Let us leave behind the temple's glow and step into the roar of the 20th century, a century without wheels. The 20th century dawns, but without wheels the sound of history is different. No automobiles roar across highways. No bicycles hum down narrow lanes. No trains thunder on spinning axles. Instead, the world moves by sliding, gliding, and floating. Cities wake each morning not to the rush of tires on pavement, but to the scrape of sledges across rails, the hiss of steam pistons driving linear motion, and the churn of propellers pushing fleets of river barges. Imagine a metropolis in this world. Its streets are not filled with cars, but with tracks carved smooth and shining, polished rails laid into stone. Upon them glide industrial sledges, driven forward by pistons that slam back and forth, or by bursts of compressed air lifting them on cushions. These glide cars lurch and groan, but they carry workers to factories and families to markets. Above the city, airships drift like silver whales, tethered to towers that rise like needles into the sky. Without wheels, aviation becomes the crown jewel of progress. Propellers and wings provide what the circle never did: speed, reach, and freedom. Highways as we know them never appear. Instead, nations carve sledways, vast ribbons of iron and stone, lubricated with oil or water, along which trains of sledges are pulled by pounding engines. They grind forward with sparks, a thunderous echo across the land. Where our world saw cars swarming by the millions, theirs sees convoys of air-cushioned sledges, groaning leviathans dragging commerce across continents. Society itself bends around these technologies. Suburbs never sprawl outward in endless roads. Instead, cities remain dense, vertical, pressed around waterways and rail sled corridors. Public transport is the lifeline, not the private car. People move in masses, not alone, their lives shaped by the rhythms of communal motion. The culture of independence born from the automobile never blooms. Instead, cooperation, shared travel, and collective pace become the norm. Industry, too, looks different. Factories rely on pistons, hydraulics, and oscillating arms. Assembly lines advance not on belts of wheels, but on sliding platforms that jerk forward in increments. Machines are larger, heavier, more brutal, but they still produce the miracles of modern life. Radios hum, lights burn, planes soar, all without the hidden gears and wheels we once thought essential. The absence of wheels even reshapes war in the modern era. No tanks roll across battlefields. Instead, armies unleash sled-armored behemoths dragged along rail tracks, firing from platforms that grind forward with mechanical fury. Helicopters and airships dominate the skies, their rotor blades replacing what wheels could never give. In cities, troops advance on hover-sleds, skimming just above the ground on cushions of air. The clash of war is no less deadly, but its sound is alien. The roar of engines, the hiss of air, the grind of sledges. And in the 21st century, technology leaps further still. Maglev systems dominate transport, lines of superconducting rails carrying sledges at blistering speeds, gliding silently without wheels. Streets hum with hovercraft-like vehicles, their air cushions glowing in the night. Airports look different too. Planes land not on wheels but on ski-like rails, sliding to a halt across frictionless surfaces. The very design of the modern city is shaped by this truth. No vehicle turns on circles. All of them glide on lines. Society adapts in ways subtle and profound. Without cars, traffic jams are different. Not seas of tires, but bottlenecks of sledges grinding and sparking as they queue on tracks. Without bicycles, childhood is different. No learning balance on two wheels, but instead racing reed rafts down canals or gliding on hand-built sledges down stone paths. Without gears, even time feels different. Clocks never tick with wheels turning inside. Instead, time is marked by pulsing pendulums, linear scales, and oscillating rods. Yet, in all this, humanity still reaches for the same dream: connection. Even without wheels, people build nations, span continents, cross oceans, and lift themselves into the sky. The modern world is still alive with energy, invention, and ambition. Only its soundscape is different. Where our world hums with rotation, theirs thrums with sliding strokes, pounding pistons, and the whisper of air cushions carrying civilization forward. But beyond the present lies a horizon still waiting to be written. What does the future hold for a world that never turned the wheel? What paths open when technology no longer clings to circles, but races forward in lines? Let us step into tomorrow, into the future they are building now. a future of possibilities as strange and boundless as the rivers that first carried them forward. The future of this world unfolds like a river without end. No wheel ever turned, yet humanity has never stopped moving forward. Now, in the age of boundless technology, their tomorrow glimmers with inventions that are both strange and familiar, reflections of our own world reshaped by the absence of circles. Picture their cities 100 years from now. Towering spires climb ever higher, but between them glide streams of hover-sleds, silent and swift. Air-cushioned highways crisscross the skyline, carrying passengers on platforms that float as if weightless. Below, canals are still alive with barges, though now they are powered by magnetic fields, gliding on cushions of force. The city hums not with the spin of tires, but with the sigh of air and the pulse of electromagnetism. Transportation becomes their obsession. With no wheels to bind them to roads, they leap forward into levitation, magnetism, and flight. Personal transport takes the form of hoverboards, not rolling on the ground but sliding just above it, sparks dancing at their edges. High-speed sled lines span continents, magnetic pulses pushing capsules at dizzying velocities, linking distant cities in hours. Airships grow sleek and vast, no longer clumsy balloons, but streamlined leviathans cruising the skies, solar panels glittering along their sides. And beyond Earth, the dream of space beckons. Rockets still thunder skyward, for the circle of the planet and the vacuum of the heavens do not depend on human invention. But their spacecraft are shaped differently. No wheels turn inside them, no spinning stations simulate gravity. Instead, artificial gravity is sought through linear thrust, through oscillation, through constant acceleration. Their colonies in orbit resemble vast rivers in the sky, long corridors stretching endlessly. Not rings turning as in our visions, but lines flowing forward into the dark. Medicine, too, transforms. Without centrifuges, they once stumbled, but in the future, they harness microgravity itself, sending samples into orbit to separate blood, cells, and particles. Oscillation and vibration replace spinning, and breakthroughs emerge from methods we never explored. Their science learns not to mimic circles, but to master flows, pulses, waves. The rhythm of the universe becomes their guiding principle. Culturally, the future blooms in unexpected ways. Their art celebrates rivers of light, processions of lanterns flowing across night skies. Their philosophy clings to the arrow of time, life as a journey forward, never repeating, always moving on. Their religions teach that destiny is a current, sweeping each soul toward an eternal sea. Even their sense of memory is different, not cycles returning, but legacies stretching endlessly into the distance. And perhaps most profoundly, their societies are bound more tightly together. Without the individualism of the automobile, without highways carving isolation, they remain creatures of community. Cities are dense, public transport is lifeblood, and people move in masses. Loneliness is rarer, but freedom is narrower. They trade independence for connection, and build futures where cooperation is not an option, but a necessity. What then is progress in such a world? Is it measured by speed, by wealth, by conquest? Or is it measured by resilience, by creativity, by the refusal to surrender even when the simplest invention is denied? Humanity proves, in this alternate timeline, that no single object defines us, not even the wheel. Picture the horizon of their tomorrow. Maglev sled lines glowing like rivers of light across continents, cities rising like forests of glass above canals, airships drifting in silence toward the stars. Their destiny, like ours, is not limited by what they lack, but ignited by what they dream. And so, the future stretches out before them, not as a circle turning endlessly, but as a river flowing without end. They move forward, not by rolling, but by gliding, sliding, soaring. And in that journey, they remind us of something vital, that progress is not about the tools we invent, but the courage to keep moving, no matter the path. And now, we return to you, to the world you know, the streets filled with cars, the bicycles racing past, the steady ticking of clocks powered by turning gears. It is easy to forget how much of our existence rests on something as ordinary as the wheel. Easy to overlook the circle that carried us from the fields of barley to skyscrapers of glass. But step into this other timeline, the one we have traveled together, and you see how fragile progress truly is. A single invention missing, and the entire course of history bends. Empires rise differently. Cities breathe differently. Science struggles, yet finds new roads. Even faith and art take new forms. Humanity, denied the wheel, still refuses to stop. It glides, it slides, it soars. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson, that we are not defined by what tools we create, but by our relentless drive to adapt, to imagine, to endure. Think about what this means for us today. How many wheels have we yet to discover? How many shapes of progress lie hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone bold enough to see them? And how many times have we mistaken the absence of one tool for the end of possibility, when in truth, another path was waiting all along? History, real or imagined, whispers the same truth. Invention is not destiny. Courage is. The story of humanity is not written by the tools themselves, but by the hands that dare to shape them, and by the dreams that refuse to let us stand still. So tonight, as you leave this journey behind, remember the rivers and sledges of that other earth. Remember the cities that grew dense and bright along their canals, the airships that crossed their skies, the future they carved from persistence alone. And then look at your own world with new eyes. The wheel is only one path among many. The true wonder is not in the circle itself, but in the imagination that gave it power. And so, I leave you with one question. If humanity could survive without the wheel, what else might we survive without? What else might we one day discover that reshapes everything we know? This is What If History. If this journey has made you think, if it has stirred your imagination, subscribe now and join me again as we walk into the worlds that could have been. The history's not written, the future's not yet told, because the past is never just behind us. Sometimes it flows beside us, waiting for us to see what might have been. Until next time, keep wondering, keep imagining, and never stop asking, what if?